Hey Ottawa, this is your Monday market snapshot for the Ottawa real estate market for August 26th, 2024. My name is Annalie Rice. I'm a realtor here in Ottawa, Ontario, and every week I bring you the details of what's going on in the Ottawa real estate market. Last week I had a great question from one of the viewers asking about townhomes in Barrhaven. So I had been making the comment a few times over the last few weeks that the number of townhomes listed for sale in Barrhaven were really high, and they were asking whether or not there were, just more townhomes there. And so I decided to do a little bit of a deep dive into sort of what types of houses you find more of in different suburbs. So I'm going to include a bunch of charts and information. It'll be in the section after the main stats, but before I get into like the different stats for each suburb. So stay tuned for that if you're interested in that, and I hope it makes sense. Please do continue to ask questions on the videos, just because that's what keeps me on my toes and helps me provide info that is helpful to people who are watching. Okay, let's see what's happening this week in Ottawa. Okay, so these are the stats citywide, and I think it's funny that this week is the week that I'm going to include a bunch of other new stuff, because really not a whole lot has changed citywide for the stats. The active listings changed by 11, down by 11, and the sales went down by 2. So really not a whole lot of change this week. In fact, if you look at the graphical form here of all the inventory breakdown, you can see that the last 4 weeks, our overall inventory, that's the black line, as well as the active inventory, that's the green line, really haven't changed much, like, the slightest decrease. I do expect that to change this coming week. We'll see a lot fewer new listings because we're heading into another long weekend for Labor Day weekend here. There might be a few more sales this week just because people want to firm things up before the long weekend. But then, of course, after the long weekend, there's always a drop off. And actually, if you look at the little dash lines where they intersect back a year ago, you can see that huge drop off in the number of active listings. That would be the equivalent to this coming week. And then you can see the drop off in the sales a couple weeks after that is because when there's fewer listings and people have a long weekend, then there's a week or so later than that, there's always a big drop in the sales. So do expect that these like flat lines that I'm seeing on these charts are going to change in the next week and two. Okay, so for talking about new listings, we had 366 new listings, properties that were listed this week. 104 of those were relisted properties, that's the gray line, and 262 were new to the market listings. So the breakdown was 28% relisted properties and 72% new listings. So that still is a fair number of new listings. I do expect it to drop this week heading into the long weekend, but it'll jump up probably quite a bit the week after that. Okay, so let's look at the sales next. We had 211 sales this week, and 13% of those sales were with no conditions. That was a big drop off from last week and the last couple weeks, and it is obviously a big trend down from where we have been. Generally, we're a little closer to that 20%. It was down by 5% this week, and 22% of the sales this week sold at or above asking, and that also was a big drop off by 6%, but back down to the levels we saw for the weeks before that. For sales within the first 7 days, was 20 properties that sold, which was 9% of the sales, and 50% of those sold with no conditions, and 80% sold at or above asking. So continues to be pretty competitive in the well-priced, well-marketed places that are fresh on the market. They still have fairly good no conditions and above asking price. For sales within the first 30 days, it was 43% of the sales. That was 90 properties, and 17% of those sold with no conditions, and 39% at or above asking, which is actually, we're seeing that trend come down quite a bit. Okay, so we had 47 properties that sold at or above asking price this past week. 29 of those sold for at asking or just up to 1% above asking price. That was 62% of the sales. And then 14 of them sold between 1 and 5%, which was 30% of them. and only 4 homes, which represented 9% of those at or above asking, sold for more than 5% above asking. This week, we kind of reined it in. There was a lot less of the larger overages that we've seen in the last few weeks. The highest percentage was 11% over asking. It was also the highest dollar value over. It was $71,000 over asking. It was an end unit townhome that was a parcel of tied land, meaning it has some association fees for private road, and in the Hunt Club area. And it's sited on NCC lands, a big, huge forested area. So pretty desirable for that aspect of it. It was listed for $629,000 and sold for $700,000. Okay, so normally I would just zoom in and we'd see the stats for each area of the city, and we will do that. But first off, I do have a bunch of charts and things that I'm going to share. And it's going to talk a little bit about demographics, types of housing in the different suburbs of the city, and sort of look into it a little bit more as to like if there's more of a certain type of housing in the different areas of the city, and what is a little bit different about this year. Okay, let's see that. Okay, so this first slide is a little bit of background on it. I'm sharing the demographic info that the City of Ottawa shares at the end of each year, or sort of snapshot at the end of the year. I think they release it later in the next year. This is from the end of 2023. First off, this is just for the suburbs, the 3 major suburbs. Kanata and Stittsiville had a population of 144,750. Barrhaven and Riverside South and Orleans were both just over that 128,000 population. So the percentages that I have underneath of that just is percentages of those 3 population bases, definitely not, the whole city or anything like that. It's just because later on I use pie charts and you need to have 100%. So for the households though, if you do notice that, it's a little different. You've got a higher number of households in Orleans with the same population as you've got in Barrhaven and Riverside South with a fewer number of households. And that's largely, and this is my estimate of it, is because Orleans has a lot more condos than Barrhaven and Riverside South, at least at this point. And so therefore, you've got typically you've got smaller households in Orleans with condos. So then you've got more households to make up the same population. So you can just sort of pay attention to the population base, 32, 32, 36 for Kanata, and then households, the number of households, so that would be like the number of properties that could sell, 36 Kanata Stittsville, 31 for Barrhaven, 33 for Orleans. And I say Barrhaven, it's Barrhaven and Riverside South. Okay, so this is also just sort of setting it up. This the first pie chart there is sort of a repeat from the last slide that was numerical. It just shows you that Kanata and Stittsville, which is going to be red throughout all of these charts, is 36% of the households. Barrhaven Riverside South represents 31% of the households, and Orleans represents 33%. So that is sort of like the standard. And then what I did was I looked back at how many sales were there if you look at each of those suburbs and how many sales did they have last year in 2023. And it kind of matches out. Kanata had 1% more, so at 37% of the sales. Orleans was at 32, and then Barrhaven Riverside South was smack on at 31. So they very much resembled their household percentages. It made sense. Okay, so this next 2 charts are looking just at the detached homes. We're comparing the active listings. This was all taken last week's snapshot about, Tuesday-ish. So the active listings currently, and then how many sold in 2023. And this is sort of just to look at, are the number of homes that are listed now representative of what has sold in past years. And at this case, it's just last year. So we can see that Kanata has a higher percentage than its household percentage. So it's 39% of detached homes. And it also matches up with how many it sold. 39% of the detached homes were in Kanata last year. 32 active, and then 33 for sold for Orleans, and then 29 and 27. So this is where the losses are there. So Barrhaven Riverside South has fewer, or had fewer, detached home sales than its population base. And we'll see that on the next slide, which we'll get into the townhomes and see that more of their sales, more of their homes or active listings are in the townhome market. Okay, so here's the same thing for the townhomes. And when I'm talking about these, it's actually maybe best to look at the second one first. You look at how many sold, and that'll sort of give us a snapshot. And then you can look at how it's different right now. So Kanata had 35% of the sales of townhomes last year. So that's just 1% of its household, below its household percentage. Barrhaven had 37% of the townhomes that sold in 2023. So obviously, 6% above its household amount. So clearly there's more townhomes that have sold, and we'll see it in a longer pattern in the future here. And then Orleans has fewer townhomes. It had 28% versus its 33% of households. And then if you look at the active ones there, you can see that, Kanata is a little higher than its average, but Barrhaven has a huge number of townhomes on the market. 42% of the active townhomes are in Barrhaven, Riverside South right now. And then it's sort of at the detriment there of Orleans, only has 21%. So these are obviously not raw numbers, like actual numbers, and you could look at that. We'll see the number of sales in future slides here. Okay, so now I'm going to break it down into the different suburbs, and there is a lot of information on all of these. So once you listen to my little spiel on it, please pause it, look at a little bit more detail, ask questions if I'm confusing. What this shares is, the last 9 years, full years, obviously 2024 is not on there, but the number of sales. So the left-hand the vertical axis is the actual number of sales. So you can actually see how many sales there were. And then the years along the bottom. But I put in the percentage of that yearly sales that were in detached row and condo. So we've got a stacked bar chart there, and you can see that the Kanata is almost 47 to 45% sales are of detached homes. The row market, peaked out at about 38% of the sales were in 2021 were row homes. And you can see that their number of condos, the percentage of homes that are selling that are condos, has climbed over the time. It was only at 11% back in 2015. And it's climbed up even as the number of sales has shrunk. It's still at about 15% of the market. So they've definitely been building more condos in Kanata and Stittsiville. It's taking up a larger percentage of the number of sales in the suburb. Okay, so this is the same thing for Barrhaven and Riverside South. And what you are going to notice here is that the number of sales, percentage-wise, is a lot lower for detached homes. Only about less than 40% of the households or the sales in the Barrhaven Riverside South area are of detached homes. So they have fewer percentage-wise detached homes in their suburb. It's over 40%. It started out 41% back in 2015, and it's sort of sat around there. So 40, 41, up to 43, now 42% in 2023. So they do have a higher percentage of townhomes in their own suburbs. So a lot more townhomes being built and sold there. Condos, you can see there that market share of the market is also climbing. It peaked in about 17% of the sales in 2021, but it's still sitting above, at 14% of the sales are condos. Okay, and finally, we'll look at Orleans. You can see that it started out, in 2015, they had about 50%, just over 50% of the homes or the sales transactions in Orleans were detached homes, only about 28% for townhomes, and they already had at that point 17% of the sales were condos. Now in Orleans, there are a fair number of condo townhomes that resemble very much a townhome segment. They look very much like townhomes, but they do have a condo association with them. But in the recent years, they have built a lot more actual condos where they're, mid-rise or the high-rises out at Petrie Island and such. So their condo market is growing, and you can see that in 2020 there, it was 24% of the sales in Orleans were condos. You can see also that the townhome market is climbing there. It's up well over 30%, peaked out at 32 in 2021. And that's sort of coming at the detriment of fewer single, like detached homes being built. They're down to about 44% of the sales. So the areas to the south of Orleans are a lot more townhomes being built, and usually there's chunks of townhomes in there, condos as well in those new areas. Okay, so next up, we'll look at it from a little bit of a different angle there. First, I separated out the detached home sales, but now this looks at Kanata, Barrhaven, and Orleans. And of all of the detached home sales over those past 9 years, where were they? So we started out 2015, you kind of got that 37, 25% for Barrhaven, Riverside South, and 38% Orleans. So you could see already, this is 9 years ago, that Barrhaven Riverside South had fewer detached homes even back then, and it's grown slightly. It's at 27% in 2023. Orleans is the one that's seen the most drop, and as we saw on the last slide there, that's probably due to the fact that they're building more townhomes and condos in Orleans. And quite frankly, the detached homes sell for a lot more if they're in Kanata and Stittsiville, Barrhaven, Riverside South than they do in Orleans. So if a builder's going to build the exact same home, why wouldn't they build it in a more expensive market? You could see that Kanata, has started out at 37, 38, and now it's up to 39. So is Kanata becoming a bit more of a detached market? Fewer townhomes, fewer condos, possibly. We can look at the trends over a longer time in the years to come. Okay, so this is the same thing for townhomes, and I want to just recage us back. Remember that the number of households was 36% of the households are in Kanata Stittsiville, 31% are Barrhaven and Riverside South, and 33% are Orleans. So anytime where the percentage of sales of a certain type are above their sort of baseline number, you can know that the number of that segment of the housing type is higher in that area. So here we see for townhomes even, so 37% for Kanata Stittsville started out 2015, peaked at about 38, and now it's down to about 35%. And that's because if you look at Barrhaven, Riverside South, they started out already at 35%, 35, 34, and they're sitting up, around 37% of the sales for townhomes are in that market, when they only have 31% of the number of households. And then Orleans already started out with fewer, 28%. They ended up at 28 as well, peaking at about 30% of the sales in 2021 across the city or across the suburbs, being for townhomes. So they have fewer townhomes as a percentage of their households there. Okay, and then this one is for the condominium sales. And I think the big takeaway on this one is you can see how high of a percentage Orleans has for the condominiums. They've solidly been over 40%, up to 45% of the condo sales in the suburbs happen in Orleans, and it's always been pretty solid for that. The other areas are, they still have a good number of condo sales, but Orleans, as one of the smaller suburbs, has a lot of condos. Okay, back to the normal stats. So here's the central urban region, and we can see that the detached and condo active listings went up, townhomes down slightly, and sales were down fairly significantly for the condos and up slightly for detached and towns in the last week. And we see Kanata Stittsville, a slight decrease for the number of detached on the market, but still sitting quite high, just under 200. 112 townhomes on the market, just up by one. Condos steady, and sales were pretty flat. Detached, it's pretty low number of detached homes selling. It's at 11 there, up 3, and townhomes were flat, and condos at 4 sales, which is up 1. And for Barrhaven, Riverside South, not a whole lot of change, just up 2 for detached, 114, which is down 3 for townhomes, which spurred this whole conversation, and a drop of 5 for condos. Sales were up slightly for detached and towns and down just 1 for condos. And finally, for Orleans, we have a drop for detached homes on the market, a slight increase for towns and condos, and sales were up slightly for detached and down for towns just slightly and steady for condos. Okay, so this is the full data in chart format if you want to pause it or look at it and see the different areas of the city and compare them. And then the same thing for the townhomes. And finally for the condos. And with all the different chat about condos, and we're talking about the different areas of the city that had condos, it is clear from this, you can see that the vast majority of condos in the city are obviously in the central urban region and not in the suburbs. So the suburbs have less than 50, 60, 40 in Kanata active listings, and here in the central region of the city you've got like 650. So a different type of condos for the most part there. Okay, so that's my update for this week. I apologize for my stuffed up nose and being kind of lackluster of energy. After my vacation, I got sick with COVID, so I've been nursing that for the last week. And I hope that what my little update there and on demographics and the different types of housing was helpful. But if you have any questions, please let me know and I'll see if I can elaborate or correct myself if I made mistakes. And I hope you have a fantastic week. For me, it's the last week before my kids head back to school. So I will try and get out and enjoy as much time as I can with them after I'm feeling better. Have a great week. Bye.